Good morning, everybody. Hi. I'm Terry Gerson, the president of the National Academy of Public Administration, and I am very pleased to welcome you here today for what promises to be an exciting discussion on the President's Management Agenda's one-year anniversary. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the organizational studies that the Academy routinely performs and publicly posts that government agencies improve fundamental management and governance functions. What you may be less familiar with is how we also organize the input of our standing panels and our fellows. The purpose of these panels is to convene our thought leaders on topics critical to the success of public administration through regular meetings with experts and current officials and to produce new insights that advance the field. Our standing panel on the public service recently completed a series of seminars with key leaders from the Trump administration to discuss the implementation strategies for the President's Management Agenda. They also prepared and compiled their own perspectives on the PMA and their recommendations to make it better. And that's the book that you received when you came in this morning. I do have to say at this point that I am very grateful for Alan Balutis. Alan chairs the standing panel on the public service and has really demonstrated expert leadership in guiding that seminar series and the collection of essays by our fellows. He's also had the lead in organizing today's event. So I'd like to ask Alan to stand. And I'd like to also ask any of our other chapter authors from the book to please stand. Thank you all. I'm certain that you will find their perspectives as those who see many PMAs come and go, especially informative in thinking about what we can do to ensure that we recognize the best outcomes from the initiatives played out by this administration. I'm also grateful for our sponsors for today's event, Meritalk, Accenture, Deloitte, ICF, and Cisco. Without their generous support, today's event would not have been possible. So I'd like to make two administrative announcements. First, please silence your cell phones. Second, because we are recording today's event, we'll be handling the question and answer part of today's event through written questions. You should have all received an index card on your chair. Please use that to write any questions that you have for the panel and pass them to the pile on the right. We'll be collecting those, and that's how we'll be managing the Q&A portion of today's event. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Alan. Thank you.
Well, welcome. It's always a VIP group after the fellows gather, but I want to make special acknowledgments of as it says here today, is senior executives at HUD and budget and played a key role in the modernizing stimulus. So thank you for doing that. I can say it was a great privilege to be able to organize these sessions. I won't say this was a great joy, but it was a joy to organize before. And I think that you enjoy you have the program in front of you, so we're not going to go through the materials, sequence, introduction, you might have all that to read. That I did want to do one thing. There's been some debate, confusion, and even the good and powerful professors at NAPA papers called it the anniversary. I prefer it to birthday. order to start. By paraphrasing somebody else's statement, that we're dealing with a 19th century institution that uses 20th century processes and technologies to try to deal with 21st century challenges and problems. But we made great progress in the first year and more to come in the second year. With that, I'll turn it over to Margaret.
Great, thank you so much. Really quickly, we have kickoff questions for each one of them. So Margaret, 1 year in the PMA, what has been your big wins and challenges? Okay, well, first of all, it's an absolute honor and privilege to be here. I think one of the things that is the biggest opportunity I found is that there's a community focus across the country. So obviously here in DC, there's a nexus of folks interested in the wonky topic of management and the implementation of the President's Management Agenda. But we actually went to launch the President's Management Agenda in Kansas City, the heart, literal heart of our country, to make the point that for this to actually matter, it has to translate throughout the country. It has to take root. And we actually went and met with folks at Veterans Administration. We met with a group of farmers. We went to a small arms manufacturing facility. We met with university leaders. We met with local innovators and businesses to make the point that the thing that we want to be different is we want to stand on the shoulders of the folks that NAPA historically brings together to think about these tough challenges. But we actually need to really make progress. We need to move beyond talk into action. And I think that's the place where if you have a government that's led by business, a business savvy individual, and you bring in folks who have, business experience, you're going to focus a little bit more on how do we apply the research? How do we actually work with, the framework we have is designed inherently to have checks and balances. It's not designed like a corporation, so it is in fact different. But how we actually make traction on achieving the mission, service, and stewardship objectives, we really looked at the successes and the challenges of the past. And IT modernization is something that everyone knows is important. The technologies are old, we all know that. But how do we get money to actually modernize those? How do we implement IT projects that take more than 1 year? The matching of the IT funding with the actual IT needs led us to look at things like the Technology Modernization Fund, the centers of excellence that folks like Anil Cherian have helped us lead, are looking at how do we connect the dots around funding and the way technology projects actually work, which don't fit neatly into 1 year appropriation cycles and actually need more flexibility. The COEs helped us connect with those very same farmers that we met with in Kansas City 1 year ago, which was really compelling to have user-centered design opportunities that helped modernize the processes with a customer lens to actually say, how do farmers and producers and ranchers actually need to get information so they don't have to drive into USDA offices and leave the farm. And I think that's a great example where it's not just about talk, it's about action, it's about the challenges facing farmers. On the federal data strategy, data was something we called out independent of IT because yes, data strategy is rooted in a lot of technology challenges, but the sources and uses of data need to come together, whether we're looking at oversight action, whether we're looking at the uses of data to do commercialization of data, the way NOAA data is used in literally hundreds of apps, the way GPS data is used in hundreds, if not thousands of apps. And so we've completed the first federal data strategy, which is going to be coming out shortly. Suzette will talk more about that. The thing that actually I think is the most different was the nexus between IT and data with people. So we have a exceedingly complex framework for the most important part of service delivery model. So in the 21st century, whether you're a bank, a farmer, or a government entity, you are delivering solutions to that nexus of people, process, and technology. They're not separate, and yet our personnel systems are utterly inflexible. They're overly, exceedingly bureaucratic, and they're very, very hard to change because we manage through statute. We actually have, the board of directors in Congress implementing, pay systems at the micro level, at the locality level, in a way that it is very hard to manage through. And so civil service reform is something that we're looking at freeing up and decentralizing and giving agencies and people more ability to influence. So we have direct hire authorities that we are giving for STEM jobs. We've done a number of things to free up our ability to make it easier to do skilling. So cybersecurity jobs are another area of great importance. So we're doing a pilot to reskill mid-career professionals into jobs of the future. So those are some of the examples. Last thing I'll say is we have a lovely online at performance.gov highlight of some of the results and experiences we've had this year, again, designed to be citizen and people-centric and build on the thinking from the broader community. So hopefully that's a good overview. Thanks, Margaret.
Emily, we'll go to you next. Can you discuss the role that CSA plays?
Thanks so much, Terry. And I want to say it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with such great partners. Margaret and Suzette, many of you in the room have been instrumental in helping us make progress. So happy to be here to celebrate the 1-year birthday. It's hard to believe that last year, this time we were having burnt ends in Kansas City. Lots of people not have fun cupcakes, and that's good. But behalf on behalf of GSA, I and all of you at GSA, we're just excited to have the opportunity to support the President's Management Agenda. We're listed as a co-lead on 8 implementation partner on 8 of the 14 cross-agency priorities. So we've been busy. It really makes sense because it aligns with the agency's mission on providing mission support services across the federal government. GSA is an agency where we work on places and things to support the people of the federal government so they can support the people of the United States. And so the PMA's vision, modernizing the federal government to improve an agency's ability to deliver mission outcomes, to provide excellent customer service, and effectively steward taxpayer dollars, strongly aligns with GSA's core purpose for being. So 1 year later, where are we? I think we've had a lot of progress on sharing quality services. Point out that the federal government spends $28.6 billion on administrative services, but 38% of federal leaders report low satisfaction with mission support services. So GSA, partnering with OMB, has been really working on how can we do better? How can we thrill our customers? One way, as Margaret mentioned, is the Center of Excellence. We partnered with USDA about a year ago. They were our lighthouse agency. We set pretty ambitious goals. We said we're going to close 18 data sets. They exceeded that goal, and they closed 21 data sets. We saved over $20 million for USDA so far. And going forward, we're going to be able to save between $6.9 and $8.5 million per year. All of this is being done in a way that gives the secretary better data and gives a better experience to the customers, to the farmers of America. And we're continuing to make progress with our second agency, the Housing and Urban Development. And I highlight this because the Centers of Excellence and our broader shared services solutions really aligns GSA with their core mission for their agents. Another example, the DO's procurement will account currently with the Department of Defense to provide them with software capabilities and their productivity suite across the agency to replace legacy IT systems. And it's created a partnership where we can look at it and look also how we can deliver better services to those agents. New thing, September of last year, GSA awarded a $2.5 billion 10-year contract to improve how we pay federal employees, give us additional flexibility, and modernize our payroll system. The fleet consolidation. GSA manages 270 areas to improve at shared services really is realizing that we are just as special as everyone else, which is not always that special. And we find that our agency customers benefit from being the same. There always are going to be areas where people are unique, but we're trying to minimize them. Another great example of today was listening in August last year when we talked about smart K3. And the federal government has transitioned over. And that's our credit card program across the whole government. We found that agencies about 75% of the processing and transaction costs, which meant that last year we got $110 million in refunds back to agencies. I think the key point behind this is that every dollar saved is a dollar our agency customers can use to achieve their mission, and that's meaningful. It strikes at the core of the president's mission. So I want to close my remarks by really thanking and recognizing the people who are making the PMA process happen, our federal workforce. As an agency, it's GSA's job, as I said, to provide the places and the things that let people do their job. And as we continue our work on the PMA to support those people, I think we're going to allow what Margaret said at a division for us to continue with this, where we're going to have people doing higher value work and delivering higher value results. So I think the GSA is very proud of the role, and it's great to be part of the partnership. Thank you all.
Thanks, Emily. All right, so that IT modernization kind of is here in the middle. So can you talk to us about some of the things that are going on?
I certainly can, and also thank you for allowing me to be here today. I think that almost a year ago, for the PMA launch, was one of the first things I had the opportunity to be involved with by joining government. And my first session here at NAPA, I think I knew Terry and Dan Zenek back there, and no other faces in the room. And I'm thrilled actually to talk about the PMA, but that's not the case. Because one of the exciting things about the PMA was that it served both as a frame and a focus. And I'm going to highlight some of the great things that gave us the intensity to focus on and achieve last year, but also how it continues to paint the roadmap forward. Because across all the agencies in the modernization side, I have the opportunity to work with every one of them. And there are so many things that we can do. Margaret talked about technical debt. At the same time, we have to innovate for the future. We have some really interesting opportunities to, as we make that technology transformation, not to just take a single step, maybe the steps that we missed earlier, but to take some giant leaps. And taking those giant leaps means that we have to look at the technology and the data and the people at the same time. So bringing those together on the IT modernization side, we focused last year on a couple of key things: updating all the policy and getting some of the barriers to using modern available commercial technology and industry best practices out of the way, and ensure that agencies had open force to move forward as quickly as possible. We also put the spotlight on data in ways that we can better use data to solve complex problems. Margaret mentioned things that we could use to stimulate the economy, stimulate research, and support broader activities across the nation. Inside the IT community, it's the way we're looking at ways that we can share data to better serve citizens and to better deliver on missions. And some of those this year have been so powerful across multiple agencies. The things that have been accomplished in Department of Energy, HHS, some of the things that we're doing now with use of advanced technologies. It was very exciting for me actually to talk with the GSA team when a CFO comes forward using automated technology and gets excited about it. That's a big win. That's a big win for us. But across the entire community, the frame and focus of the president's management agenda let us hone in on particularly those systems that hadn't been updated in a decade or two. And when I had to put the notes here, SBA, GSA, HUD, Commerce, we took paper-based processes across labor, state, and DHS and made those digital. We had a great accomplishment in getting all agencies connected with DHS cyber information
information. And now this year, we're gonna work on making sure the quality of that information, the accuracy and timeliness is, continues to improve. You know, SSA, USDA, I can go on, and I hope many of you have spent time with those agencies. You see that real progress. It's in the stories that Margaret pointed to, that are on the website. I don't know if I bring paper, I'll point to the website. But the real indication is the improvement of services, that has been achieved. Many of the savings that, Emily highlighted were because of the modernization effort and that focus, that came. And I'm very excited for the things that we have to look forward to in further use of data, shared services, and very importantly, I'll also end on the people side. As we look at the modernization activities, what we also realize is that side by side, it is imperative that we ensure the investment in the right skills for our workforce are present. And some of those barriers, I talked about changing the policy, but actually some of the barriers were that we needed the skill set inside the agency to sustain those new technologies as we roll them out, to make best use of what we can do with the cloud. In reference to the collaboration for email and collaboration tools, if those tools across both the DoD and the civilian community, we've had some of those tools. We've had a mandate for 5 years. We've had to make progress. We've moved to, almost over 70% now, not only making progress, but driving innovation and interoperability. So those are some of the things where we will continue to move forward. Those are real results from modernization efforts. They have delivered value this year, and they're going to continue to deliver more. We're just going to use that same frame.
Great, so I want to encourage all of you, if you have a question for this first panel, pass it to the right, and we'll put those up. I'm going to kick off the Q&A part with one question, so you can get yours down on paper. So for each of you, you tell us what the next 5 years of this is. So I think operationalizing the theory that we put out and continuing to move forward with a number of the cross-agency priority goals is really where you kind of take it from theory into practice. So cross-agency priority goals are really the measurable areas of the program, and there are a lot of really great metrics that we've achieved. Category management is one where we've got a little bit of news. I'm going to have some guidance coming out later this week from OMB. But the work we've done on category management has had the impact over the last year of saving $17 billion in cost avoidance and reducing the number of contracts by 7%. That's really critical. Part of what I'm going to be focusing on, in addition to the things we've laid out already, is this question of money. And there's a huge amount of money tied up in the procurement contracts themselves and how we administer them. So the cost of procurement is something I want to look at. I want to look at how do we apply some of these same thought processes around IT, data, and people to empower our procurement professionals to use technology tools to save even more money, to get clearer around data so that we can programmatically and consistently identify duplicate contracts, discrepancies in what we're paying for, and get better on things around purchasing services, and particularly customized services, to find things that are similar so that we can get the best cost. So that's a huge area of focus, is that kind of procurement area, and we'll have something that we're working on, the acquisition modernization program that we're going to be talking more about over the next year. The other thing is just the general construct around how we fund the infrastructure of government. So again, I talked earlier about the notion that checks and balances, and one of the core elements of our democracy bureaucracy distributes the power of the purse separately from the power of management and administration. And that's on purpose, and that is good. The challenge is when you have complex solution delivery that is combining people, process, and technology, and you've got things like technology debt. We have real challenges in getting the money in the right place. And this is a non-trivial problem that's been there since the beginning. I like to say, if you think about how the Continental Army was funded, the problems of the first being separate from the execution have been there since Benedict Arnold didn't get paid back for the battles of Saratoga, and George Washington did not get paid back for, funding the Continental Army through some very difficult times. Figuring out how we don't let that get to crisis, and some people might argue we're already in crisis when it comes to technology debt, it's an imperative. And that is sort of a place where the Gear Center is something I've talked a lot about. We'll have more announcements coming this spring about a competition to bring the power of academia, the private sector, together with the challenges of government to really fully, dive into how do we apply lessons from the private sector in a very empirically driven way, an evidence-driven way. So that to me is where I'll be focused a lot over the next year.
So, so much that I would say, well, shared quality services, we said we wanted 10 years. That this was not going to be something that we were going to be able to tackle all $28.6 billion overnight. And so we've been looking at this in a very step-by-step process, trying to do where we are identifying agency needs, identifying common standards. Right now, we're working very closely with DHS on contract writing systems. So we're going to be continuing to move forward with on shared quality services in that strategic way. But we're also using a lot of the IT modernization, as I referred to, that we're doing for product process automation. The technology that we're using, PMA, also trying to bring the $90 billion in tech spend into alignment to make sure we're spending that wisely. We're in acquisition. We're also working to make sure that GSA, when it was created, our contracts were for states. Over time, we had contracts with banks, we had contracts with services. By October of this year, we should have all of our schedules and schedules consolidated to one, that agency can buy solutions, and that so that our contract officers aren't spending as much time processing paperwork, our vendors aren't spending much time uploading paperwork, and our agency customers aren't spending as much time trying to cobble together a solution if you go and buy that solution through GSA. So a lot of exciting things to work on.
I'm going to hit a couple things real quick. I agree with shared services as one of the goal sponsors, actually getting that moving and seeing real results and the buy-in to the business case, and more importantly, the customer satisfaction, increasing that satisfaction with the government. But specifically in the tech area, a couple of very specific years, specific things. When I look out in 5 years, the broad scale use of automated technology should be something that is standard and common in all agencies, not an experiment, not something that we're looking at in small pockets. Sustained operation at scale. We're doing a lot of really interesting things right now across many agencies. The concept of the COEs was to drive some of that, but we need to make those operate at scale and sustained scale across the agency. Those disciplines, those robust practices are not just for a small point in time or a small project. They're the way that we get change done as we go forward. An ongoing culture of innovation. I am excited and thrilled all the time in certain areas of government. There is a culture of innovation. But again, that's not something that we have broad scale and don't apply necessarily to all of our missions. So we're trying to take some of those best practices, whether it's through things that we do at the center, like through our council, the CIO council who sponsors some, working with the other councils, putting those things in the center so that that culture of innovation Margaret, you mentioned some funding flexibilities, in your initial remarks. For all of you, as you look at the funding challenges, will you also be looking at how current budget rules prevent adoption of creative partnerships across the public funding and nonprofit?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely a critical question. We need as many flexible ways of leveraging common interests between the public sector, the private sector, the research community to focus and use the challenges of mission to shape how money is spent across government. You know, I think one of the things that's unique about our government compared to other governments around the world is our federal structure. And so much of how our money is spent, the money collected at the national federal level, is actually decentralized, and yet it doesn't necessarily help with capital planning. So what most happens is once somebody finally gets some money, then there is an incentive for that money to continue to be spent that way, sort of ad infinitum, and there's not an easy way to reprioritize, restack where you want to push the money. So, 50 years ago, robotic process automation would not have been a thing, as they say. Today it is, and it's noted by its outcomes, despite the fact that, little software robots, they're not hardware robots, could do so much to make the lives of our employees better, to help serve citizens differently. And there are plenty of players, some of them might even be in this room, who have a commercial interest in us untangling the kind of barriers to that adoption. And yet, I don't have the authority to accept a pilot gift of a service. Even GSA, which has some authorities that O&D doesn't have, or OPM doesn't have, or even DoD doesn't have the ability to accept software as a service because we don't have the authority to do that. We can test out new bandages on the battlefield because they're things, but we can't test out software in the same way. Those are areas where I think the Gear Center that we talked about is one method. I think there's a lot of things we're looking at. We talked about in the reform and reorganization plan about where there may be organizational constructs that can help. There may be new authorities needed. There may be some administrative things we can do. But maybe more than anything, I'd like innovative thought on this question of how do we preserve what is good about separation of the power of the purse from the executive management. I mean, that is a by design inefficiency built in that we don't want to get rid of because that's part of the stability of our democracy. But we do need to figure out how to get money to the priorities of the 21st century.
All right. So we've had some conversation about people and modernization of our global systems. And we've got the cyber workforce initiative and some other things. So are OPM and O&D going to support pay banding government-wide, or do you have some other initiatives to help address the pay challenge?
So I think it's a great question. I think there are a lot of solutions been proposed over time, and one of the things that we're about to go to field with is a broad, modern compensation, rewards, and recognition study. I think there's been a ton of focus on pay, which is actually a very narrow component of what motivates human beings once they've met sort of the basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter. And oh, by the way, getting a paycheck is an absolute baseline. So people get paid, they want paychecks. That's critical. But in terms of how much and what the actual dollar amount is, whether you talk to millennials or you look at the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, the things that are the biggest concerns to our employees actually aren't pay. And they're certainly not benefits. So we score over 60% approval on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey across every level on satisfaction with pay. All things considered, I am satisfied with my pay. Over 60% of feds respond. By contrast, only between 30 and 40% of feds agree with the and recognition things. In the 21st century training, access to reskilling opportunities, access to interesting projects, interesting work, belief that I actually can make a difference in the work that I do is my number one recruiting tool when I'm trying to hire people who are going to take a major haircut on their salaries to come work at the U.S. Digital Service on limited term employment. Their biggest concern isn't pay or pay bands. That's almost an afterthought. It's what work do I get to do? So we want to field a broader conversation, and I think pay is too narrow. So pay bands might be one of many things we look at, but I feel like mission and purpose, particularly among millennials, but certainly among our federal workforce, that is the number one thing. Over 90% of our employees on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey say the work I do is important. They're here for the absolute right reasons, but they're not getting the rewards they really want, which is making a difference for the American people. That's why people are here. So, long-winded answer, but we're thinking about it, but in a much bigger context.
I want to add a little, that maybe this would drill down, you mentioned the cyber reskilling, but that, and not pay bans, but one of the things, and one of the reasons that the, cyber reskilling is exciting, but it links to some of the things we're talking about, is that, we ask the question, we have a need, is there anyone who's interested? We didn't follow some of the rigid processes. And we look capability, not specifically your resume must look like this. And this initial effort actually focuses on people who aren't in IT, not in IT, but they demonstrate the capabilities of analysis, pattern identification, some of the types of things to make these cyber defense warriors successful. And identify those individuals because they're part of the government, they're passionately committed to mission, we know they got a background check, and we have lots of open jobs. What a great win across the board for investment in those individuals as well as filling some very critical needs. So what this experiment and this pilot is letting us do is commonly across all of the agencies talk about the job capabilities, and start to leverage that for how we look at some of these critical emerging new things. So that was focused on cyber, but we know we're going to need data science, we need data model builders, we need laborers, we need synthetic data analysis. As we look to what the future is going to look like, there are skills for which we don't have. And so some of the reskilling activities are teaching us to use the muscles to leverage the capabilities we already have in the federal workforce and augment them with those new things that, and I hope as we look at what comes in the next 5 years, that's another thing that we get a lot better at, because we have people that have some of those pieces, we need to augment them.
When I look out across GSA's workforce, and about 12,000 people, I would put it in 4 buckets. Trying to recruit the right people, trying to retain the people we have, trying to reskill them so they have the skills that can be successful, and trying to recognize the work that they're doing. And send out salary is one way of recognizing, but certainly not the only one. But that's, as we continue to move forward in technology modernization, and that is, I'm really grateful for the partnership that we've got between OMB, OPM, and GSA. Those are, we're going to need to increasingly working on the reskilling and the retention portion of this as well as recruiting and recognition.
Well, I really want to thank all of you for sharing your high-level perspectives with us this morning, so please join me in thanking our panel. We're going to bring up the second panel now. So you've heard from the high level what the administration says. Now we're going to hear from some agency heads and some folks in the industry on what it looks like at the execution level. So we're going to pardon us while we swap for a minute.
And actually, before, while the swap is moving on, I wanted to
modernization. It's a well-structured, holistic framework. And it's going to drive not just modernization of systems, but modernization of government. And I think that's a really important. We're not just talking about IT, we're talking about how to transform government to meet the needs of citizens in today's world where people expect frictionless, convenient, intuitive services and mission results that are delivered at scale and at speed. What I particularly appreciate, or among the things that I appreciate about the PMA is that it's based on data, not assumptions, and that shift can't be underestimated. It also builds on what's working to get starting from scratch. And given, as I said, the pace of change that we're at, being able to build on momentum and create what I like to think of irreversible momentum so that we can transform government without having to start and stop every 4 years. It's absolutely critical. And I really applaud the administration for doing that. That's not always the case. So we need to think about where we are today, providing building blocks for the future, not just for the next couple of years. The direction we would be moving, I think, really does. The second thing is that leadership really makes a difference between incremental progress and the kind of groundbreaking transformational change that we're talking about. We need to move fast and scale based on priorities, not just a whole laundry list of things. So the PMA and the capital recognize the reality that agencies are at different levels of maturity. There's a pretty broad spectrum. Agencies are going to proceed at different paces and at different speeds. And we need to understand where they're at. What's enabling change, what's enabling some to move faster than others, and what it will take to replicate and give all agencies the opportunity to surge ahead. I think the TMS and the COEs that were mentioned earlier and that we talked about in detail are really good examples of accelerators that provide the resources that agencies need no matter where they are on that maturity spectrum, and do so in a way that leverages partnership with industry so that we can get commercial practices and commercial technology quickly into government to be able to operate at scale. And then finally, I just want to mention data, which, as Suzette, Emily, and Margaret talked about, is really what will fuel this change. We're at an inflection point. I'm thinking that it's been a decade, which is kind of hard to believe, since open government was first introduced at scale. Now, with the force of law behind it, open data is seen as a given. So we need to not just make data open, that's not enough. We need to make it easier to use data to have more impact than possible in the past. Margaret talked about launching the PMA in Kansas City. And if you look at the customer experience capital, it starts with a maturity assessment, which is really important to create a baseline. But the meat of it is really based on data. To understand where those farmers, ranchers, producers are and how they're experiencing government services. To enable both new services and new systems to be designed around what customers need rather than new policy or change. And then finally, the federal data strategy has an awful lot in it. It needs some focus and prioritization so that we can do a couple things. One is unleash data that is trapped in legacy systems so that we can fuel the kind of AI and applied intelligence that Suzette talked about. We can then bring in robust analytics to be able to yield efficiency at scale and get us to be able to not just modernize government, but really drive the kind of transformational innovation that's more possible today than ever before. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Neal. I'm with ICF. I'm also a NAPA fellow and chair of the NAPA board of directors. So great to see all of you here this morning. The part of the PMA that gets my attention, given my background in human capital, is the building a 21st century workforce. If you look at civil service, we have what I like to refer to as a mid-century modern civil service. So it's great if you thousands and thousands of pages. Like safety standards, there are hundreds of the job series. Those classification standards and job series in many cases have not been updated in years. Some of them are 20 years old. You can imagine how much it's changed in all those years. So the thing that I'm most interested to see is OPM and OMB using the regulatory authority of government to do as much civil service reform as possible without trying to rely on the comprehensive civil service reform, which I simply don't see happening in this budget. And I think there's an enormous amount done with regulatory.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Or should I call you Sean? I see what that means. So I'm really happy to be here. Let me just say that I'm probably the only person who's not been in government services for a long time. But I've been here about 3 months. I spent 30 years in consulting. I was a partner in PwC and IBM, and about 6-7 years as the CIO at SunTrust Bank. So I was happily retired, and then Margaret and Emily and Suzette convinced me to come over. And I think this is a great opportunity. What I run is TPS. I'm the Director of Technology Transformation Services. So that's housed in the GSA, but it's really what I consider the tip of the spear as far as a lot of the change that needs to go on from a technology IT modernization standpoint. And that inherited a group. I'll kind of briefly talk about the group and take you through where I think we should go from here on. The group of TPS is the signature group within TPS is the COE. And when you think about the COE group, that's really where we're making transformation happen from the top-down perspective. And the interaction between the transformation team, the agency, and all the partners that we work with is really driven from the secretary on down. And the approach that we've taken is there are 4 or 5 key things that we need to be doing. One is really address client experience. And so we've got a client experience center. Second, there are so many call centers. We talked about USDA. USDA had about 38 call centers. And if you're a citizen and you call one of those call centers, call another one, you probably got a different answer. So just consolidating the call center, driving better client experience is the second COE. The third COE is all about data center modernization. It's about upgrading what's in the data center, a lot of legacy platforms, a lot of technology there, and there's a significant amount of work that needs to happen there. The fourth is about cloud migration. In USDA and the data center migration, Emily talked about the actual moves of number of data centers. They had about 38. Now our goal is to get it down to 2. And that's we've accelerated that whole process. Migration to the cloud is the fourth area. I think 4 or 5 years ago, no one really wanted to migrate to the cloud. That's a big chunk of our work, and just making that faster, easier, more recognizable. And then the last piece is all about data and analytics. So if you go to study with you in USDA, you'll talk about the scorecard, you'll talk about the dashboard, you'll talk about the self-study. He's inculcating the way of looking at data. This is driving it top down. It's the way of looking at data and the way in which each of the businesses really look at outcomes is driven by data. So those are really the 5 COEs, and that's kind of the top-down too. What I've also got is a group called AT&F. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's about 100 consultants. They do user-centered design. They're very active in a lot of agencies. I think there's about 17 agencies right now. Another group called the Presidential Innovation Fellows, of which there's about 20, 25. We're working about 13, 14 agencies. Again, they're also doing some really important work in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and some really interesting work in the field as well as helping people build. The last group is a group that you may or may not be familiar with and think about. I know, Kathy, you're really familiar with this, as David Shore is as well. It's the Office of Programs and Products. We have in there FedRAMP, the Code.gov, Jobs.gov, USA.gov. I think there's a series of 4 platforms that can be built, that can be shared platforms. Login.gov is another one that things that we really want to be driving, and it's really driving the PMA agenda. One is build momentum. Kathy talked about building momentum. How do you build momentum? Well, we've got two COE agencies, USDA and HUD. We're going to have another 3 more this year. We're in active conversation. We're probably going to be announcing one in April. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have 3 running by the end of this year. Secondly, we are driving and establishing sustainability. And this is I think you might have heard Suzette talk about sustainability. Let's not make it a thing every time. Let's make it something that's happening on a regular basis. So to create these 5 COEs, how reusable are they? Have you learned anything from it? Do we add some more COEs? Talk about intelligent process automation, RPA. That's a clear opportunity to build a COE. So build the sustainability in terms of how demand comes in and how the real competencies are built. So we're not just making it a new thing every time. We're reusing the capability. We're also reusing shared service. And the last piece of it is really driving with excellence. There's an opportunity here to grow too fast. There's an opportunity here to not do a good job. But there's a real opportunity to really make a difference in terms of being more outcome-based, being more decision data-focused, and driving to results. So really driving for excellence. So those are really the 3 major targets that if you look at us in 2 years, I want you to look at us and say, have you gone with that?
So I sat down with Anil probably 2 months ago and started chatting, and we had the same hair. It was a great way to get started. But he brought a very common sense private sector perspective. A lot of times when you have appointees come in, first thing they say is everybody else who was here was didn't perform. And that's very rarely the case. It's about listening first. And as we talk about the present time, it's about counting. There's nothing wrong with counting things. If you look at the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative when it was launched in February 2010, OMB said there were 730 data centers. I mean, fewer. Next thing you know, we had 12,000 data centers. So I think running away from it is not the way to go, and to go real big on that. So coming up with real metrics, I think that was very encouraging this morning in the presentation that Margaret and Suzette and Emily gave. Let's not run away from numbers. Let's count things, because while the hill may not honestly understand what numbers get well, it's in the count them. So we need to do it. Karen, maybe you can do this from that.
Well, first of all, I want to I've had all these problems my whole life. So I might be getting a little perspective. But from Commerce's standpoint, we've been involved in work on a improving acquisition management, program management for the last 8 years actually, and we've made some significant progress. And I think part of that is why Margaret and the team said, "Oh, there's someone, Kobe, probably knows how to spell acquisition." And I use the big A concept, not just procurement, the total life cycle of the program. But one of the things, and it goes back to what Kathy indicated, is that relative to at least with the capital 11, every agency is at a different point in the life cycle. So it's not one size fits all. It's really one size at a particular period in your life. So some of the concepts that have been laid out first, as far as concentrating on performance output and trying to measure that immediately, is probably the emphasis on long syllables. You have to first get to the basic blocking. Sorry, did I? I practice a lot, but I don't fall to it pretty much. But the problem is that we have to concentrate on the basic blocking and tackling first. So what it looks like, we're 8 years into this process already, and I still can't identify every program manager in the process. We still have a lot of work to do in that area. But there are some other agencies that they don't even know what a program manager is. And so they need to still get to that workforce development. So trying to concentrate on a dashboard with, well, how well is what the performance looking like on some of your major programs, without having that blocking and tackling done first, it's a compliance exercise, and it's not really going to get where you want. So I caution on that approach that we
actually implemented this, we have not had a single acquisition, big A, acquisition major program failure, where when we started 8 years ago, we had 4 in a row. So, it can work, it does work, and it leads to, better products for our citizens at a lower cost and a more efficient program. And I actually did provide a one-pager to, Margaret, relative to just one of our satellite programs. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that at Commerce, we have satellites, we have airplanes, we have ships, we count fish, we count people, so I guess that's why we count fish. We know how to count people. And then we have, the patent and trademark office. I mean, it's a very diverse organization. But it was one case where we were able to show by doing this improvement in program management, how we really were able to adjust a situation with our weather observing satellites where we had a very high risk of a potential gap observation to no risk. So that we have some good examples. And that it doesn't relate as easily to a farmer not having to get his, Sunday going to meet the truck and drive 4 hours to go to an office, put in an application. But it does relate to that farmer when they can get an accurate weather forecast in the future to know when they have to bring that hay in, so it doesn't cost. So it maybe takes a little bit harder to get to that relationship. But anyway, that's what I want to caution on the capital piece. And then as far as PMA in general, I mean, trying to improve program management, the Program Management Improvement Accountability Act will go a long way to get there. I hate to be a naysayer, but a couple of points that I think are a problem. Don't look at this guy over here, but I've been screaming at him for a couple of years. There's no teeth in it. And unfortunately, in government, if you don't have teeth, it's hard to get things moving and get people actually paying attention to it. So it's not like non-McCurdy. So if you have a non-McCurdy breach, you lose your appropriation immediately if you don't answer questions within 30 days. So we need some teeth in it, and we need to understand that it's going to take some time. You just can't build a workforce of professionals that can do program management overnight. It takes more than a couple of years. So it's going to take some effort to do that, and sharing with you. And one other item that I think is very useful is that as the individual responsible for a total acquisition in Commerce, I've combined on a quarterly basis our acquisition and our chief information officer council. So on a quarterly basis, we have a single meeting so that from an acquisition standpoint, I understand what the CIOs are trying to get to. The CIOs can then at least verbalize to me what I need to do to make their job easier. It goes back to some of the things that the first panel was indicating. We can test out Band-Aids in the field. It's hard to test out software. We need to stay abreast on cyber activity. So as soon as a new product is available, be able to install that. It may only have a life of 6 months, and you need to go get another one. But the point is, we can't do that right with our bar, and we need to come up with ways around that. So coming up with innovative approaches and working with the CIO, if you're there with the customer in the trench, it makes the jobs of getting to the mission accomplished. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think, as you look at the challenges of communication is obviously a very important part. Listening to people is a very important part. Talking to the Hill is a very important part. I think that Thomas, who was the congressman, that said he didn't understand why we had Noah, because we had a webcam, right?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So, Dave here with Deloitte. Also, as many of you know, spent like more than 36 years in the federal government on a couple of different tours. And, when I was reflecting on the first anniversary of this president's PMA, I went around the room and so many familiar faces. There's lots of folks in the room that I first met more than 25 years ago when Vice President Gore launched Reinventing Government. And I think it's important to sort of put where we are today in the perspective of where we've been in the past. I mentioned, I had the opportunity when I was at the IRS to engage in that initiative in the Clinton administration. And we've had the initiative around performance in Janek and others that are in the room that were involved in a launch of e-government before in the George W. Bush administration, the PART program. Then I joined the Obama administration in the administration, where the Obama administration had a series of cap goals that we're trying to do, you know, including government, whether it's technology, people, or data. And what struck me last year, right after Margaret, Emily, and Suzette launched the PMA, was the fact, and a couple of the speakers have made this point, is, you know, things that worked in the past, we've picked up and actually built on, and we're pushing it forward. Because I think when you put it in the context of 25 years, you know, the first question that you got was, what progress have you made in a year? When I look at the progress, we've actually made a lot of progress in 5 years. I think the challenge is, how do you keep the focus for the next 5 years? Panelists were asked, where do I see it for the next 5 years? It's got to be leadership. It's got leadership at the political level, leadership at the career level. It's got to be focused. It's got to be buy-in by, you know, Margaret touched on it. Look, we have a board of directors that's rather large, rather diverse, right? And it's hard to get them to agree on anything. So I think part of the challenge is continue to, every single day, actually address the issues. And one of the things that struck me when the PMA came out last year was, and then I compared and contrasted it to what I was doing at O&B, was first of all, the level of leadership at the most senior levels, both political as well as career, leading the cap goals, to the level of detail with regard to, here are the tasks that we're going to undertake, and by golly, here's a timeline with milestones. And I think most importantly, totally transparent. If you look at the quarterly reports that come out, it's not like everything is great. You need to go back for a couple of quarters. You'll see, well, you know, we thought we were going to hit this milestone, but you know what? We found out this was harder than we thought it was. Create into an unanticipated issue. So I really do, Margaret, applaud your sort of picking up what's been done over the last 3 or 4 years. Adding, I think, a level of transparency and discipline and leadership. And I think, you know, somebody once said that this is not a sprint. You know, I've heard it referred to as a marathon. I've also heard it referred to as a relay race, where you're going to hand it off to the next set of folks. But I think the key message is you got to keep focused on the issues around people, especially the career people, around the data and the technology. And we need to work together, both government and industry, with all the stakeholders, the Congress and all the other stakeholders, in order to make the government really responsive to our citizenship.
Are we fielding questions from the audience, or? Fill out the cards. I'll get us started. There was discussion about free public-private partnerships. I call that the definition of insanity is this concept of that. Maybe you can just pass a comment on your thoughts about public-private partnership and its role in modernizing government, workforce transition, transparency, and
Look at public-private partnerships. Some people think about that and say, well, this is a new idea, and it tends to be viewed as something that's political, where other people think of Democrats wanting to have more government and Republicans wanting to have less. But you know, this year happens to be the 50th anniversary of the first and moonlighting. And how was that done? It was done with a public-private partnership in effect. NAPA and a number of contractors who participated in designing and building the So this is something we've actually been doing and just calling it something different for a great many years. And I think the only way to address the product problem is that there are many things that we do in government. I think we've been in government so long, I still think it's government this week. There are many things that we do in government that can be done better in partnership with the private.
notion of exchange of value is what people get freaked out by. But there has to be an incentive for industry to come to the table, and that, I don't think that's bad. You have to monitor P3, but at the same time, if there's no exchange of value, there's no point doing it in the private sector at that point. So I think putting it on the table.
I would just add to that by echoing the point about the importance of procurement reform, and not procurement reform in the ways we've done that in the past, but in light of the comments that Margaret made about restructuring, how we're able to engage, because the idea that it is so hard to bring in innovative technology at scale, along with people who can help in partnership with government, really bring those new methods and ways of thinking and working to the innovative people in government so that together you can solve problems at scale. It just, it takes so long and there are so many limitations, not necessarily based on rules, but in part based on human practice. So I go back to let's really think about what is possible. Focus efforts on reform on those things that are legislatively or statutorily restricted, rather than those that are just bad habits that have been brought forward over.
How many people in this room are in the IT business? Show of hands. Quite a few. And if you look at the changes we're seeing in the market today in the government market, I've been in this market for 28 years, and I know a lot longer than I have. But Amazon is like Amazon, hate Amazon. They are changing the whole ecosystem, and that's a disruption coming from the outside. So when this change is happening, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whoever it may be, Uber, you're looking at government impact. Do we see that? But I think this disruption is not just something that's going from inside out. It's something that's going from the air that we breathe.
I think one of the challenges when we think about public-private partnership is working on new initiatives. And I say this from having worked in the government and the private sector, is, there is such risk aversion in the government in trying new things. And, I sort of want to build on what Jeff talked about with NASA. I mean, I love to sort of watch all of this space stuff. There was a kid growing up watching, the original Mercury program, and then think about how the last couple of years, and what Elon Musk has done, right? I mean, I was fascinated to watch him being able to bring the booster back on the field. But could you imagine if NASA had failed as many times as he failed, and how many different GAO reports and theories we would have had, and NASA would have gone, we're out of the business, we're not doing this. So, I think part of it is the partnership is the financial aspect, but I also think there's a recognition that for the make the kind of changes we're talking about making, there is risk. There are going to be some
Aspects of this.
And I may not know all the nuances behind the question here, but if you look at the financial services industry, the level at which you integrate with a lot of different partners is tremendous. From the processing of your checks, your processing of your systems, from the partnerships that I had in SunTrust were over 1,700, and you kind of depended on that. But the issue of risk is always one that has to bear pretty strongly in that process. And it's a culture change to get people to get to that point, but it becomes inevitable.
Well, I would just have to agree, especially with comments that Dave made. In commerce, we have a FirstNet. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. It's the First Responders Broadband Network. This was such a major change the way government does business. That was a major, big, public-private partnership, and it's working. It's working famously. But I still hear in many meetings that we go through the reviews, the naysayers or the people so concerned about the risk, and you're not looking at the results. In this case, there's a perfect example where now you need to really measure the performance. So we're getting to a point where there's so many more people on the network, first responders, that are actually using the system. We've had a couple of major disasters, natural disasters over the last 2 years, and FirstNet is actually having an impact. So that's a great case study. Maybe we need to do some more, go back
already had you thank the panel, Doug, and Les on both sides. I won't repeat that, but I would like to thank again our sponsors, our authors, and please make sure if you didn't pick up a copy of the book on the way in, to get one on the way out. I'd like to thank the NAPA staff for all of the logistics work behind this, and I would especially again like to thank Alan, who really drove the agenda and put it all together. You know, it's a famous government phrase, progress has been made, much remains to be done. But I think what we've heard today is a road ahead that has really practical steps in it towards really impactful change. And so I invite all of you, as a result of your participation today, to continue to be part of that process. And thank you all for joining us.